Hello everyone, I am Scutlist, and I've been busy with a thorough playthrough of Samurai Warriors 5. Things have been rather quiet on the front of Warriors games for quite some months now, but after all this time we have a new Samurai Warriors to sink our teeth into. But there is reason aplenty to approach this game with apprehension, cutting out a large chunk of the roster as well as ending the story at Yamazaki rather than continuing into the Toyotomi era. Samurai Warriors 5 has something to prove after that. Did it succeed, or did this reboot utterly fail? Without further waiting, let's begin. Quick note, since Samurai Warriors 5 is based on a historical time period, you should be more or less aware of how the story will progress. But if you don't want to get spoiled on the specifics of how exactly Samurai Warriors 5 tells the story, please go away now so you can approach the game unspoiled. I won't be discussing the story too much, but I will give away some pretty major plot points. Samurai Warriors 5 is the next entry in Koei Tecmo's Samurai Warriors franchise, a hack-and-slash game based on the Warring States period of Japan. Earlier entries in the franchise went for character-specific stories. Samurai Warriors 4 instead opted for clan and region-based stories. Samurai Warriors 5 returns to character stories, but only for two people. It follows the tale of two men, Nobunaga Oda, a rough man known for an insolent attitude, and Mitsuhide Akechi, an honor-bound man who is rather set in his ways. Being the main characters, Nobunaga and Mitsuhide get special treatment, such as being the only characters who feel the effects of age with older-looking designs. Something the Warriors games don't always communicate very well is that years, or even decades, are passing in the main story. That character who looks super youthful early on will still look super youthful later on when something like 20 or 30 years have passed in the time period. These grown-up versions are not just alternate costumes, the older versions are also characterized differently. Older Nobunaga is the stone-hearted demon king who makes very little reaction to the death of allies, whereas older Mitsuhide has repressed his morals and has become very cold in pursuit of Nobunaga's ambitions. This is the earliest back in the time period the franchise has ever gotten. Typically, the franchise largely glosses over the early era of Nobunaga's rule, with little if any discussion about his dealings with the Saito or the Oda civil war with his brother. In fact, Nobunaga's relationship with the Saito, his marriage with No, and his relationship with his father-in-law Dosen are major early game plot points, compared to other Samurai Warriors games where most of these matters are already settled by the start of the Oda story. In fact, the typical first battle of an Oda story, Okihazama, is a fair ways away from the beginning of the story, which is honestly for the better. The Battle of Okihazama, where the Oda defeated the then very powerful Imagawa clan, is a major event in the time period, but in Samurai Warriors it's rarely anything other than an unremarkable tutorial battle for the Oda story. Here the battle is built up to properly, the Imagawa menacing the Oda in several battles and the narrative emphasizing the degree to which they outmatch the Oda, leading up to Nobunaga's surprise victory over Yoshimoto Imagawa. In Samurai Warriors 5, each character returning from the old games has been given a redesign. Everyone who returns has a new costume, as is usual with a Warrior sequel, but several of them have new personalities as well. Nobunaga actually starts off as a fairly humane guy, and instead of being introduced as the callous Demon King, he instead character develops into this personality. But this comes with its own share of problems. The writers want Nobunaga to be seen as a good guy in the early story, which results in some of his earlier acts being either omitted entirely or rewritten. Take the Oda Civil War as an example. Here, Nobunaga's brother, Nobuyuki, accepts the rebel faction of the Oda supporting him in a rebellion, so that Nobunaga can put down the rebellion and unite the clan under him. In contrast to the actual history, where Nobuyuki conspired with a foreign clan to try and remove Nobunaga, a treasonous act that Nobunaga would execute him over. There are other characters who are now very different. Shingen Takeda, for example, is a much more sinister and antagonistic character rather than the jovial grandpa he was in previous games. Hisahide is no longer an utter cartoon talking about how he's the greatest villain in the land, but is instead a very ends-justify-the-means character who uses underhanded schemes in pursuit of what he feels is an ideal world. Samurai Warriors 5 also gives us various new characters. Some I like, others that I feel are underdeveloped. Take Yasuke as one example. an African who was in Japan during the time period. There is no discussion as to where he came from other than a few quick passing lines. Yasuke himself is not exactly a great character. He has no trait to him other than just being loyal to Nobunaga. This is partially because he comes so late in the story, only appearing in the final 3 battles, but it makes me hope that Koei can do more with him in the future, as he had a very underwhelming first outing in this franchise. One of my more favored new characters was Shika no Suki, a supporting character from Mitsuhide who wants to revive the Imago clan. From both a story and a gameplay standpoint, I really enjoyed him, but can we get rid of the stupid horn baseball visor? It's the only part of his visual design I don't like. For story progression, if you played previous Samurai Warriors games, you know generally everything that's going to happen, as each new entry is basically a narrative reboot. In Samurai Warriors 5, who wins and who loses a battle is generally dictated by the actual history of the time period. In history, Hisahide's rebellion against Nobunaga ends in failure, and he opts to blow himself up along with a precious tea kettle. In this game, Hisahide's rebellion against Nobunaga ends in failure, and he opts to blow himself up along with a precious tea kettle. There was one almost exception. When I did the Battle of Yamazaki at the end of Mitsuhide's tale, I was wondering if we were going to defy history and have Mitsuhide prevail over the Hashiba forces. It could have gone either way. On one hand, Mitsuhide loses his main camp and many of his retainers. But on the other hand, he does fight his way right into Hideyoshi's main camp and defeats him. But we ended up staying historical, and Hideyoshi wins with a cutscene cheap shot. For battles that are completely off from history, there are the Reverie battles, straight up what-if battles. In the actual story, Nobunaga defeats the Imagawa at Okihazama, but there's a Reverie battle where you're with the Imagawa and you defeat the Oda. Most of the Reverie battles basically just put you on the side of a faction that lost a battle in the main story. It's not very imaginative, but it's there for you if you want a more fictional side of certain battles. The final Reverie battle is for you if you want your typical happy ending. Everyone associated with the Oda has survived, and they're welcoming the dawn of a new era of peace. A little generic of a concept, but I suppose an acceptable way to end the what-if battles. In regards to being off from history, some of the characters are also used very oddly in the story. Chief among them is Kenshin. The guy keeps barging into battles he has no historical business with to serve as an extra enemy commander. This happens often enough that it gets almost silly. It feels like the reason he wasn't cut from the roster and managed to stick around was just so he could be a filler boss in certain battles. If ever a battle feels too straightforward and simple, you seem to be reaching the enemy commander oddly quickly, there's a pretty good chance Kenshin's about to pop up. Let's take a moment to discuss Sandalyu Momochi. There isn't a whole lot to discuss about the man in actual history, other than his alleged involvement in fighting off an Oda invasion into Iga territory, and possibly training Goemon. In Samurai Warriors 5, he's introduced as having a brotherly bond with Hideyoshi, but across the story begins to resent the Oda clan, and aspiring to destroy the era of warriors, takes to wearing an overly edgy set of golden armor and masterminding various rebellions against the Oda, even barging into the incident at Honoji. I feel like he was handled like this because we no longer have the chaos inciting Kotaro Fuma from the old Samurai Warriors titles, and with him gone, they wanted a new flexible ninja antagonist. So they went with a ninja who had very few hard facts about his life. Speaking of fiction Koei creates, let's discuss Koei's original character Do Not Steal Mitsuki, a ninja girl who is convinced Nobunaga is her father. I won't condemn this character for not existing historically. After all, I liked Konoichi in past Samurai Warriors titles, and it would be a double standard to like one blatantly not historical person, but criticize the other for the same reason. But what is a valid complaint about Mitsuki is that she's a bit of a camera hog. After Nobunaga and Mitsuhide, she's practically the third protagonist of the game. In a game based on history, it grates on me that a character of the writer's own invention was given this much spotlight, backstory, and development, while several historical people were thrown into a closet. Even beyond that, there are some problems with Mitsuki's character. She is the daughter of not Nobunaga, but his brother Nobuyuki. When Nobuyuki dies in the story, Nobunaga orders his infant daughter to be taken away. Toshi Mayada leaves her to be raised by a ninja family. There is no explanation as to why she believed that Nobunaga was her father. When she shows up, Nobunaga clearly doesn't like being called her father. You think someone would clarify her parentage to her, since Nobunaga and Toshi clearly know who she is. Instead, learning who her father actually is turns out to be a big shocking twist for her. To be clear, I like this character well enough, I just feel she was given too much spotlight. Moving on to the gameplay, it retains mostly all the gameplay we saw in Samurai Warriors 4. Normal attacks, charge attacks, and hyper attacks. But hyper attacks have been given a tweak in that they no longer have their own charge attack finishers. Instead, hyper attacks can be linked to the normal attack combo at any point. This is actually a good change because it makes it easier to form combos. Characters learn more moves as they level up, opening up their attack options. Early on, characters don't really have a whole lot they can do, and this actually makes the beginning of Samurai Warriors 5 a bit of a drag. The first 2 or so chapters in story mode can feel like a slog because of this, but as you level up and learn more moves, characters will feel better to play. Beyond normal charge and hyper attacks, Samurai Warriors 5 introduces what it calls ultimate skills. Some ultimate skills are attacks, others upgrade your stats or refill your Muso meter by a certain amount. Ultimate skills have a customizable loadout, and you can edit it to fit your playstyle. Personally, how I generally played was to have 3 of the 4 slots be attack types, and the 4th slot be the skill Recuperate to restore my Muso meter. As a note, the ultimate skills that upgrade your stats actually have a small AoE effect that stuns enemies that are right up against you. This AoE can even stun enemy officers, so it definitely has its use for combat. Characters also have their own skill trees that you can spend skill points on. Some skills are locked behind level requirements or weapon proficiency requirements. Skills can range from simple increases to stats like attack or defense, or new Muso meters, or even stuff like the resurrection skill. This is a powerful tool that, if you die in battle, your character will instantly revive with full health. You can also toggle skills to be on or off. The aforementioned resurrection skill is something you can unlock but then turn off if you feel it's made you so powerful that it's sucking the challenge out of the game. However, not every skill can be toggled. The skills that raise your raw stats, and the skills that offer you extra Muso meters, are here to stay after you unlock them. Compared to every past Samurai Warriors game that locked characters to their unique weapons, Samurai Warriors 5 lets you freely assign any weapon to any character. Unfortunately, this does away with the uniqueness of many characters. I am, in fact, more sour about this than I am about Dynasty Warriors 9's moveset clone, because Samurai Warriors had always stuck to every character having a unique moveset, with the one semi-exception of Konoichi and Nene sharing a bit of their normal combo. Each character has their own preferred weapon. Magoichi's preferred weapon is the cannon, while Takakage's preferred weapon is the katana. There aren't enough weapon types in the game for everyone to have their own preferred weapon. I just said that Takakage has the katana as his personal weapon. He shares this trait with Nagamasa, Mitsuhide, and Yoshiaki. There are a few characters whose preferred weapon isn't shared with anyone else. Older Mitsuhide is the only character who has the blade and flintlock as his preferred weapon. For whatever reason, Mitsuhide gets a new preferred weapon after he ages, but Nobunaga does not. Hanbei is the only character who has the drum as his preferred weapon. Hanzo is the only character who has the ninja sword as his preferred weapon. And Sandayu is the only character who has the Kusarigama as his preferred weapon. Everyone else, however, is sharing their preferred weapon with at least one other character. The older and younger versions of Nobunaga and Mitsuhide, as said earlier, are considered separate characters rather than simple alternate costumes, occupying their own slots on the character select screen. They also share level. If you level up the young version of a character, their older version also levels up. If you level up the older version of a character, their younger version also levels up. There are some minor gameplay differences as well, like the older versions having different Muso attacks. The only character who has a true alternate costume, without paying for DLC, is Sandayu Momochi. That super edgy golden armor he wears can be unlocked for your own use. Story mode is separated into 6 chapters each for Nobunaga and Mitsuhide. Both narratives follow the respective character. Frequently, Nobunaga and Mitsuhide share battles. Even when they share battles, they aren't always the same. Take the battle of Kanigasaki, for example. In Nobunaga's version, the battle ends when you reach an escape point. Conversely, in the Mitsuhide version of the same battle, escorting Nobunaga to the escape point is only partway through the battle, and victory requires you to defeat Nagamasa and Asakura. But only some battles are different between the two. Other battles are completely identical in terms of your objectives, with the only difference being different story scenes and different mid-battle dialogue. When doing story mode battles, the game gives you a list of available characters for the battle. It would be wise to identify the most consistent characters and try to spend a little time focusing on them. I didn't use Toshimitsu so much because I thought he was a great character. I used him so much because he had a respectable moveset and trusted he would be a consistently available character when going down Mitsuhide's route. However, be aware that Nobunaga's route and Mitsuhide's route both have a selection of side battles, and the characters offered to you may be characters you haven't spent much time with. I would suggest spending at least a little time leveling Hideyoshi and his companions, as well as Ieyasu and his companions, because these two groups are most frequently the stars of these side battles. I made the mistake of rarely using these characters in my playthrough of story mode, resulting in having to use very underleveled characters in the side stories, making for slow and unfun progress through these stages. I wish it had been more like Dynasty Warriors 8, which would auto-level your lower-level characters so that they could at least competently clear a battle. After you clear a battle in story mode, you unlock it for free mode. Free mode lets you disregard character restrictions and pick your preferred character for any battle in the game. Almost. Unfortunately, free mode comes with its own restrictions. Sometimes a character isn't available for a scenario. Typically when that character has something important to do in the story of the battle. Still, it's a frustrating restriction. Older Warriors games would have just let you play as a certain character, and have another AI-controlled version of the character also running around the map. Samurai Warriors 5 gives you 4 facilities. The dojo, where you can level up characters and their equipment proficiencies. The blacksmith, where you can create and upgrade weapons. The shop, where you can purchase items. And the stables, where you can buy and sell horses. The dojo can actually be accessed on the pre-battle screen by going into officer training. The other 3 facilities, however, require you to back out of the pre-battle menu and navigate to them. Why not just let us access all 4 on the pre-battle menu? Only one of 4 doesn't really make sense. This isn't the end of strange menu design with the game. There is a frustrating quirk when it comes to selling weapons. The game doesn't let you lock weapons as a precaution to keep you from accidentally selling something good. It also will let you gleefully sell a weapon a character currently has equipped. The only warning that someone has a certain weapon equipped is a red checkmark by the weapon. Each facility can be upgraded to enhance what you can do with them by investing different amounts of lumber, minerals, fabric, and money. For the first 3 items, you'll need to go to Samurai Warriors 5's official side mode, Citadel Mode. How do I describe Citadel Mode? Well, you know how in some battles in Warriors games an enemy officer seals off the escape point? Imagine you are playing as the officer sealing off the escape point. Each battle in Citadel Mode has you defending your base from enemy attacks. Outside of your base is some shield guards. If they die, the doors open, and any enemy that enters will damage your base's defenses, represented by the meter at the top of the screen. An important thing to note is that when I say any enemy, I do mean any enemy. A veteran of Warriors games might think that they only need to worry about enemy officers entering the base, but in actuality even the regular enemy foot soldiers entering the base will damage the defenses. Different Citadel Mode battles have different maps. Some maps have you defend a single base. Others demand you defend 2, and sometimes the bases have multiple entrances. Usually the base doors are locked with a defending shield guard as I described previously, but there are a few where the base to be defended has no guards and no doors closed. Overall, Citadel Mode requires more brain power and attentiveness than a lot of Koei's other side modes in Warriors games, but that's not saying too much. Citadel Mode can also get really monotonous and tiresome. Despite different maps and different bases, each battle has the same formula of defending your base. Had they given us more battle designs, like a battle where we raid a base rather than defend a base, it would have gone a long way to making this mode more entertaining. Samurai Warriors 5 ended up being a game I enjoyed more than I expected. I entered the game very apprehensive about the amount of content lost from previous Samurai Warriors games, but while it does have its problems, it has its perks as well. In the end, I'll give it an overall score of 7 out of 10. Primary pros of the game are a nice new take on the story of the time period that defies some of the logic of how Koei used to tell this era's story, and some refreshing new movesets. Primary cons of the game are some very archaic menu designs, and the loss of characters and weapons, no matter how it's spun, still puts a bad taste in my mouth. And that will conclude my review. Samurai Warriors 5 is a game I can recommend to people who are Warriors fans or fans of the hack and slash genre. But if you're not into either of those things, I can't suggest getting the game yourself. And that'll be it. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.
不露青丝